Okay, folks, it's Dustin here with Star City Savages. And you know what? I'm glad to have you because we've got a very special review. Today, we're going to be reviewing Cy Borg. I already did the review of Kill Engine, and I promised this to you folks, so here it is. Some of you might be wondering, what exactly is Cy Borg? Well, it is a rules light, uh, almost an OSR, but I don't know if I'd call it an OSR. It works on the basic concept of having one-page rules. Oh, let me go ahead and tell you this much. Cy Borg is specifically created by artists, and you will almost feel like this is designed to be an art book more than a game book. Johan Nohr, I believe, is the individual who put it together, and he's with the Swedish cartel, or no, excuse me, Stockholm cartel. All right, little background on Cy Borg as a system, as a game. It's based loosely, or it's put out and it's based on Morkbire, which is Swedish. That's how you say it in Sweden. If I butcher it, my apologies. I love you guys. You're great. But when Morkbire or Morkborg, if you read it with a sort of Western eye, it means dark fortress. But the Borg kind of translates. People are like, well, why not make a cyborg? Why not make the same thing, but in a cyberpunk setting? So that's what they did. And because of that, it uses a very similar design. So in Morkbire, you'll notice that there are 4 stats: agility, presence, strength, and toughness. But in Cy Borg, they've added knowledge, and I feel like that's the way it should be, specifically because this is a future setting, and there are a lot of things like working with electronics, or surfing the net, or doing technologically based things. You'll roll your 3d6 to get your bonuses, and sometimes those bonuses are a negative. You can be bad at everything in this game, and it sucks. But when you get your number, when you get your tally, you'll add your bonus to your d20 roll. And for the most part, you'll just do tests, and that's difficulty ratings, or DR. Normal ratings are a 12. If you score a 12, most of the time you succeed. So pretty much doing it all towards the beginning and the end, just thinking 12s. There are some interesting classes. You don't have to play a class. You have the option of playing a class, and the game has been set up in such a way so that it's all modular. You can roll a d6 to choose from the class that are listed in the book, or you can even check out some of the third-party classes. The community has produced some awesome third-party content for this, but let's start out with your Shunned Nanomancer. Your Shunned Nanomancer is effectively your warlock character. In the city of Cy, there's an area called G0, Ground Zero, or the Go, and it is a disaster zone. They're sort of playing it loose with what happened there, but for the most part, there was a crash, there was a space rock, or there was a lab leak, or whatever. You'd never find out, but there is a nano plague raging through, and everyone in the Go or outside of the Go runs the risk of being infected by it. The Shunned Nanomancer I would relate to a warlock, because this is your magic, but it's sort of magic at a cost. You lose a part of your humanity. Maybe I'd relate it to sorcerer, because, if you're used to that concept, this is your bloodline, or this is how it's been affecting you. So you would roll your weird, which gives you your your ability score with the modifier for presence, and you'd roll ill, which is your modifier for toughness because, you're actually sick. You have an infection. You roll your history. How did you get infected? You got infected when you spent a wild night with some neo-pagans. A star fell close to your building. You found drugs. Free drugs. They were neither drugs nor were they free. You were kidnapped and subject to horrible experiments. You got bit by a rat, or you're just born this way. And then you get another bonus, which is, do you have things like a poisoned knife, milky white eyes that can see through lies, dun dun dun, burnt orange stone-like skin because it is clobbering time, a second mouth where your navel used to be, an elongated, pointed, semi-translucent skull. I created a character that I really liked, and when I created my Shunned Nanomancer, I got this, and so I said, alright, his head is shaped like a light bulb, and he calls himself the Idea Man. So that was a lot of fun. Scales that cover your body. Alright, so that's just an example. I don't want to show all of these because I do want you to buy the product. Give it a shot. Your Burned Hacker. This is Case from Neuromancer. It's implied but never outright stated that hackers have to work in a commune. They have to work as part of a community. So if you're a burned hacker, then that means you've been kicked out of your community. People don't want to talk to you, and you've got to work with the punks. You've got to work with the party. You can't live in some kind of digital flop house mining cryptocurrency. So you'll get an apt. I'd attribute the burned hacker to being closer to the wizard, and I'd say that your deck is your spell book and your apps are your spells. That's as close as I can say. You'll of course roll for things like cutting edge and the unhealthy living because you're living off Mountain Dew and energy drinks and Cheetos because I guess that's what hackers do now, right? You have your Discharge Corp Killer. Oh man, you were employed and now you are not. I kind of like this concept of a character, and I really do love that art. Particularly, it talks about your history, your deployment, and there's some interesting backstory there. And then what you took with you. It's like, say you're mad that somebody took your stapler. Well, you burn down the building and you get your stapler back. And the Discharge Corp Killer makes for a lot of violence along the way. They have some interesting weapons. Your Orphaned Gearhead. So I would say my first instinct was, okay, these are your techies from these are your techs from Cyberpunk Red, and I'm like, no, actually, these are your drone pilots. They have a piece of technology that they work with, and that technology is piloted by them. And they're fun, but part of me feels like, if you're a fan of Cyberpunk Red, you know about things like the tech and the media. And I sort of feel I'd like to have some of these. So maybe in future, I'll try and add those similar types of classes. I feel like I'm moving in that direction. Your Renegade Cyber Slasher. Alright, what happens if Patrick Bateman decided he just wanted to let his freak flag fly? Or maybe instead of renting horror movies, he rented The Highlander and watched it on Marathon. That's what you get with your Renegade Cyber Slasher. You start each day with, and you roll a d6 to find out what your obsession is. And your trench coat, the art here does not have a person in a trench coat, but your character has a trench coat, and you roll a d6 to find out what you're hiding. You'll notice things like the Ancient Blade, or the Villament Zweihander, or the Flail are weapons you'd find in Mirkbire. Then, of course, you have your dual Logans for when you wanna be the best at what you do. The best you are at what you do when you want to pop claw and snick at a foo. Yeah, so that's your Renegade Cyber Slasher. I feel like the Forsaken Gangoon, as classes go, is the most cyberpunk of them all. You'll get a history of why you are no longer part of your gang, and then you'll roll what your specialty is, and so on and so forth. C'est la vie. Gonna move past some of these. Alright, let's go over here to armor. Armor works in an absorption fashion. When you wear the armor, it doesn't necessarily protect you as much as it reduces the incoming damage. So let's say most of your characters will have Style Guard, which will take 2 points of damage off. And Style Guard, well, it looks like clothes. It is clothes. It's a leather jacket, you know. It's finely stitched. You'll have things like Kevlar, which will take off 4, which is specifically designed to be armor. In-game exude, I love that. It's -2. If you've looked at the video on Kill Engine, the end is just the beginning. You will have debt. Debt is a big deal in this game because it's why you're doing what you do. You don't run around trying to get killed by gangs for the fun of it. No, you do that because you start the game in debt and you need to get out of debt, and you get a narrative plot for what you're doing along the way. Let's talk about weapons. Weapons are a lot of fun. Of course, you can roll to get these weapons. That's part of it. You can get specially designed ammo. But let's talk about how ammo works in the game. After combat, roll a d8 for each weapon you have fired. So roll a d8 for your ranged weapons. Or a d6 if you've gone auto fire. Alright, 1 through 3 means you're out of ammo and have to reload. Alright, you have these items called mags, magazines, and that's how many reloads you have. So let's say if you have a pistol and you have 3 mags, and at the end of combat you roll a 3. That means you've got to reload. Let's say next combat you roll a 4. You don't have to reload. Awesome. You'd have to roll a d6 if you auto-fire the weapon instead of the d8. But hey, like this, there's the potential for having infinite ammo, but there's always the possibility you'll just completely lose it all. Won't bother talking about cost right there. There's drugs, there's cybertech, there's apps, there's nanopowers. Nanopowers are really interesting because what happens is when you get a nano power, you go through the game running the risk of pretty much getting an infection, meaning that every potential power has a potential drawback. And the infestations can be awful, alright? You can be fading in and out of existence. You can have gills, which are great if you're underwater, but not so great if you're not. Alright, apps. You have a certain list of apps that you can use. Third party will have some more. If you've played Cyberpunk Red and you want to ping somebody and see what's going on, it's the Path Mapper. If you want to distract an enemy, it's the False Flagger. If you want a weapon to ignore you or go into friendly mode, that's the Trolley Skipper. Right? If you want to follow someone or tail them, that's the Beacon Worm. You install that in their tech or whatever, then you're good to go. Well, what about hacking without apps? What is my guy going to do without it? Well, what you do is you test knowledge to break into a data node. Normal is 12, but the game master might say, well, this one's a little bit harder, so you got to test 14 or you've got to test 16 to break in. And you could come across black ice. You could get a backlash. What are backlashes? Well, backlashes is this randomized roll of what can happen to you while you're hacking. and they can be pretty bad. All right, let's talk a little bit about combat. This system is very player facing, which means the GM is not going to be rolling a lot of dice. The player is going to be rolling the majority of dice. I'd say 80 to 90% of the dice. Initiative is rolled by rolling a d6, 1 through 3. The antagonist, meaning that the bad guys, go first. 4 through 6, the player characters or the protagonists go first. If there has to be player versus player PvP, then you roll agility plus d6, and whoever has the highest goes first. That's simple. If you're gonna fight somebody, if you're gonna kung fu them, or if you're gonna wail on them with a melee weapon like your flail or your Zweihander, it's strength with a target rating or a difficulty rating of d12, and then you roll your damage. If you're gonna shoot at somebody, it's difficulty rating of 12, and that's to hit them, and then you roll your damage. If you're going to auto fire, you test agility because you're trying to hold it steady. Now, when it's the antagonist turn, the players roll defense. You don't spend any time, this side rolls, that side rolls. The players are doing all the rolling. They test their agility at d12 to avoid an attack. If they are attacking, they test either presence, strength, or agility. Now, if they're using drones, it is a flat d20 against 12. Awesome, right? Of course, you've got crits and fumbles. A crit is a natural 20, and a fumble is a 1. And of course, it has this list of what you do. You can take cover or not. When the smoke clears, when combat ends, roll a d8 because you're counting your bullets. And if you've got time to catch your breath, then you roll a d4 to see how much HP you recover. I would highly recommend using stealth. If you make a lot of noise and if you kick up a lot of dust, then reinforcements for your enemies are going to show up. You won't have time to rest. So play it smart. Take somebody out without making a lot of noise, without a lot of flashing lights or explosions. Get to a safe spot and catch your breath, because you will need that d4. Starting characters are not heroes. They are victims. I've seen situations where the players would have 1 HP. It is not uncommon to start out with 1 HP. In fact, sometimes I recommend letting your players go on milk runs and just advancing them beforehand. Speaking of advancing, let's talk about how to advance. All right, this works on a milestone system, meaning that the game master is the one that decides when you can advance, when you have done enough to be able to move up. You want more HP, you roll 6d10, and if the number is equal to or greater than your current HP, roll a d6 and add that. So, statistically, a starting character is always going to gain some HP to the point of competency. You'll look through your jacket and you'll find some random things. They're not always helpful. They're not always bad, but they're not always helpful. Your abilities are going to go up and down, and I feel like that helps keep your I feel like that helps your character grow. That you're not suffering from so much power creep, because all your negatives will eventually kind of level out, and there'll be this swing. There'll be an ebb and flow. So your character will grow, and they will change, and they will be different, but you're not going to be in a situation where things stagnate and you have these overpowered superheroes. Go through, get more gear, pick up more cyber tech, make connections, play this as a narrative game. Get the feel for things. Alright, we're going to skip over the foes. The art is beautiful, but like I said, I think it's best to sort of get to know your get to know your game. There is a mission generator, and the generator is very useful if you want to flavor your own game. If you want to have some fun things going on. Look at that art. I love that art. Finally, there's an adventure included in the book called Lucky Flight Takedown. And in this adventure, a guy by the name of Charlie Sand approaches the party and he asks for your help. One of his friends, a guy named Batu, went missing. Their entire community is in debt to a casino called the Lucky Flight Casino. And Batu tried to negotiate payment, tried to work with on some things, but the Lucky Flight does not want to go that route. They want to make things difficult. So Charlie hires you to try and save Batu and to go in there and wipe out the record of the dead. This part of the book is so much easier to read. The rest of the book is beautiful, but you've got to put some effort into reading it. This part where you're actually in the adventure is a lot easier to know what's going on because it's in black and white and the text is sane. So I'd recommend, if you're going to come up with your own adventures, take some notes or get out a WordPad and actually look at the book and write down the stats for the characters and for the enemies that you're going to use. I will say that I enjoy this setting, this book. It's a setting, but really it's more of a hack, like more of an OSR game that can be broken up and things can be added and things can be taken out, and there's a lot of really cool third-party material. I'll be getting into that, and in all honesty, I feel like I'm transitioning to starting to produce some of my own third-party material for Cy Borg. Alright, so I'm Dustin Smith, Star City Savages. Check us out on starcitysavages.net. Go on DriveThruRPG and look at our store. We'd really appreciate it if you'd go there, read our book by The Drowned War, Razor and the Gale. Give us a look. Thanks for your time.